All right, here we go. Welcome, 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 everyone, to another adventure into reality. Today, I am joined by my intrepid co-host, Martina GrübMueller. Welcome to the show, Martina. How you doing? You're muted. Same situation I had, where I was auto
Now
muted.
I can. No, I can. I couldn't early on. Yeah. No. Hi, Andrew. Hi, everyone. I'm really happy to be back for another chat.
Yes, everyone celebrating. I was sick all of last week and a bit of the week before. I ended up having a really bad flu. They tested me for COVID. It came back negative. I ended up having to actually get an antibiotic to actually kick this thing. But I had all of last week and part of the week before off. And for everyone that's waiting on sessions, I will catch up to you. It is just a matter of time. Martina, we are going to be talking about the nature of writing today and the spiritual mechanics behind writing. So many people, when they're learning writing, have traumas right away, reading and writing. And it's very common in modern society now that people go 10, 20 years without reading a single book, or they don't write anything other than their laundry list of things to do here or there. And they don't practice their natural penmanship anymore, or always stuck at a computer, and find themselves not able to really express their thoughts. So today we're going to be jumping into the nature of writing and the spiritual mechanics and what writing can do for you individually on your spiritual journey. So Martina, one of the things that I came up with was the spiritual contract revocations. Now, those have helped tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people go through a variety of things. Now, those were a specific form of writing that used a form of words to help people define backdoors, loopholes, ways of energy harvesting. And over the years, you've come up with your own contract revocations, your own sets of teachings. And let's talk about the journey into writing spiritual texts and the challenges that it provided for you and the great gifts that it gave you too.
So writing spiritual texts. That's an interesting expression, isn't it? Because writing for me is probably spiritual in itself, a spiritual expression. And I started writing. I remember writing at school. My first little book I wrote at school, and it was about a friend of mine. She was able to draw only mice and elephants, so I had to write a story around, a mouse and an elephant. And it's quite interesting because you say spiritual. When I read that book, I still wrote that book in German. And a couple of years ago, I got a hold of it. And when I read it, I realized I was 15 when I had written it. I realized that I had written part of my journey expressed through the journey of the mouse and the elephant.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the first experience with writing. Now, when I look now, where you're coming from with your contract revocations, this has come much later when I've already started to look at spiritual concepts and presuppositions and all that sort of stuff. And for me, it's always when I look at your contract revocations and even my own writing, there was always an embedding of those spiritual concepts, of those teachings. And
embedding is such a key, unique frequency when it comes to writing. In novels, we call this foreshadowing, and in spiritual texts, we call this encoding.
I love that because I always call it alchemizing and I sometimes, judged myself for it in the beginning because I'm saying, oh, I'm just picking like a magpie. I'm picking this, and then I alchemize it and put it together. But actually, I like the encodement and the embedding much better. Yeah.
Yeah. And when we start to learn what encoding is, example, I in the ever present moment of now, that's an encodement. That means you, who's the ever present living being, as what's written in the statement, past, present, and future, It has all the other nature of the connective teachings attached to that statement.
It's almost like a prayer, right? A very personal prayer that is included in that writing.
Right. And that's the encoding journey. When we're writing spiritual texts, we're taking the greater knowledge and putting it into our phrase and phraseology so that when people are in the repetition or reading process, that their brain can make pattern recognitions on a bigger scale.
And
now, in a novel, foreshadowing, you almost always know when there's a foreshadow moment because the writer has just accentuated a situation that you have a feeling is going to be expanded on later in the story.
It's that foreshadowing. It's a little bit like what I said early on in my initial story when I was 15. It was almost like expressing already what was going to happen.
So the next thing when it comes to writing is the creative value of writing itself. Let's just talk about if you're writing a list of stuff you have to buy at the grocery store. What are the spiritual mechanics going on between making the list in your mind and writing it down? I want everyone to just process that a second as Martina and I go back and forth on just a list of stuff you need at the grocery store. Example, do I need bananas? In your brain, you are pattern recognizing, are the bananas over there without even looking? I need meat. I need this. Is there any ketchup left? Okay, let me go in the refrigerator and look if there's ketchup left or if it's stored outside. There is this process where you can perceive objects and places and spaces and know their volumes innately.
Absolutely, and there's also that thing is when I write a list, I was just contemplating this now, is I'm actually already creating the recipe with it.
Yes, all these other things are attached to that.
Yeah. This is interesting that I'm for one who doesn't like lists because I'd rather go and get inspired by what I see in the store and then start creating.
I'm a half list person. The things I absolutely need go on the list, and the rest is inspiration, what I see there. Like toilet paper, tissues, the things that you could easily forget.
And do you also find that so often you write a list and then by the time you've written it, you don't actually even need to look at it anymore, isn't it? It's that type of stuff too. So
sometimes, yes. Sometimes, let's say if I'm going to like Home Depot and I need screws, nails, wood, this and that, I innately know everything I need. I can look at the cart and go, yeah, I got it all to finish the job.
Yeah. So what does it do as we write it down? We bring it out of our subconscious, of our, cognitive mind and everything, and we put it onto a piece of paper. What's the mechanic around that?
That is called manifestation. We have taken a thought construct that has all these moving parts and concepts and made a bullet point notation of what makes up the foundations of that construct. Now, that is supposed to aid memorization, but there are many people who make a list and have no idea what's on the list. And that is something representative of their mental state of overloaded by information, be it about friends and family, spirituality, conspiracy. It means you are overloaded if you can't make your simple list and remember the stuff that's on it.
So it's a bit like, I've got someone in my household. He doesn't go out without having a list. And then he comes back with half of the shit that's been on the list.
Right. Now, that is as old as time. And that's why we make lists. Okay.
Yeah, that's a typical, thing. Like, I can't actually be bothered doing any of that. Yeah, there's nothing spiritual behind that, is there?
No, part of that is the way grocery stores are aligned. They're not logical in the way they put stuff up. Like, let's say you need syrup for pancakes. It's not in a breakfast aisle.
Yeah.
Is syrup a condiment? Why is syrup near ketchup?
Exactly.
because everyone associates their stuff differently. And all sorts of grocery stores use a SKU system that makes you want to buy what's right in front of you.
Exactly.
And that's why
Yeah.
so many men who go to grocery stores come back with half the list not filled out.
Right.
Because it targets women and the way they perceive shapes, object, colors, and prices.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yes, it's actually tailored for that. Now, when it comes to writing lists, that's one aspect. Let's look at something different. Like when we were all young in school, we had to write book reports. You had to read a
Yeah.
book and you had to write a report on the book. Sometimes 1.5, 2.5 pages, what the essence of the book was about. That process is, well, all right, what did I read about the book? Okay, most people, they look at the book, okay, they go back and forth instead of actually going what was in their memory about the book. So like making a list, we are looking back at the things that made influences us in the process of reading, and then going on and going through a comprehension process. Now, whenever we're in a writing state, we're using the highest form of our personal comprehension in that moment to make that manifestation of a book report that is going to be handed in, observed by somebody else, and then given back to you as a grade, which is a judgment.
It is absolutely. I like you mentioned that word judgment here, because I've seen this so much now with my daughter Emma, because all the writing that the school actually wants from them is very much, I think they call it, I've written it down, exposition writing, where there's an idea and these are the facts. And if you don't, there's no such thing as come up with your own ideas or opinions. Maybe there is an element of that, but if you don't have the facts in it, what they call facts, which is a judgment in itself, then your grade is already cut.
Right. So that is the journey of schooling that oftentimes James creates its own traumas on the reading and writing process. Now, when we graduate regular school and we go to college or university, we have to take our comprehension skills and master them for the next level and the next level. And there are a lot of people who have been so traumatized by their reading and writing experience in normal school that when they get to university, that they have to up their game. But whenever they're not in school, they don't read and they barely write unless it's for work. And in the old days, before radio and television, people would sing and dance as your daily entertainment. The television replaced communities coming together, stand-up comedy, singing, dancing, etc., as well as writing. People writing down stories and making the greater journey of creating something that was a legacy for the future entertainment of the local community. Okay? And then there are people that were writing historical dramas. This is what happened in 1776 during the American Revolution. This is what happened when Queen Elizabeth took over, so on and so forth. Those are people that were chronicling the history of the day. Yeah. So that the future generations would have something to see, feel, hear, touch, and read.
That reminds me what you said earlier on with, shamanic tradition. That's very much part of the shamanic tradition, isn't it? That you're actually journaling afterwards. You go on your journey, you have your experience, you have your ecstatic dancing and everything. And afterwards, you actually go and sit down and write down, what you have experienced. And I think when you say spiritual writing, I look at it from the connecting to the heart, connecting to having faith. It's almost like an expression of faith, that whatever you are expressing here comes from the heart. It's not an ideology. It's not what's the other, mythology or anything. It's just coming from your own center. And that requires that trust, isn't it?
And that journey into trusting ourselves is a challenge for some people. I have always said, if you're not chronicling your journey, you're faking spirituality. Yeah. And that has been a tough statement for a lot of people because they've been traumatized about their writing from the nature of school. So everyone out there that doesn't write, doesn't chronicle your spiritual journey, making it. And you may well call that harsh. I'm overwhelmed. If you're overwhelmed, you have to learn to carve time out for yourself. That's the whole point of spirituality. It is something separate of the daily, weekly, monthly, yearly life 3D matrix.
And also there is not one particular way that is right or wrong the way you journal. You know,
Right.
you can journal.
As long as it's a manifestation of something.
It's literally writing your thought constructs, your thoughts down, bringing them onto paper.
So at another point in time, you can go back and look at those thought constructs and be triggered in the encodement that's in them.
And what I sometimes find is when I do journaling, and I don't journal every day, to be honest, I just write it and I don't read it right away afterwards, because it's almost like cheating. You don't want to read it right afterwards. And then you read it maybe a week later and you have a completely different perspective on it. And it's like, oh, it's actually pretty good. You know, it's quite interesting how this works. Yeah.
I have a stack of notebooks like this times 20 over the years. I used to fill up 100-page notebook every month, quite literally every month, which was my spiritual chronicling, my physical writings, the stuff that I was doing daily, weekly, monthly. And I would go back sometimes 5 and 6 years later and look at something going, oh my God, look at the way I'm writing. It's the foundation of this, this, and this that I did 5 or 6 years later. Or I totally don't remember writing this, but it's my style.
Yeah. Okay. And it's almost like going back with hindsight, what type of person you used to be when you look at yourself now, the style changes, isn't it?
Yes. Now, somebody is in the chat room. Let me see who it is. Robin is saying, so no typing, handwrite. Good question. For the longest time, I hand wrote everything and I resisted writing on the computer. And then I had this personal internal vision that I had to take everything that was in my notebooks and put them on digital document. And over a series of months, I forced myself to do it. And what I did is I took all of my notebooks from as far back as I can find, and I started putting them in individual documents and individual stuff. And when I was done, I had a whole different understanding and presence about it.
Yes.
Now, decades later, I'm at a point where I very rarely handwrite my stuff. I do it all on the computer because the nature of my business. But there are many times that I turn the computer off or I don't take it with me, and I have a notebook that comes with me, and I start scribbling out my mental thoughts, concepts, and ideas for greater constructs that I want to make. So does it have to be only on hand? No. It's your personal choice. But if you're one of those people that has lots of notebooks like I was, I highly recommend that you actually do the process of looking at them all and putting them all into a document so that you will have literally read and rewrote all of your own stuff.
And also, this is a source of a book or many books you could actually, use at some stage and publish if you wish, and add some stuff to it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So yes, and I just want to say to handwriting or not, I do both, because the journaling in the morning, the dream time journaling and stuff, that sometimes I just do that in handwriting. And sometimes I find when the flow is quite fast, then I can't keep up with my own writing.
Yes.
I write it. It's just a waste of time. I just go on a computer and write it there.
It becomes scribble shorthand.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or you start writing the one word and incorporate the half of the second word, and it's like, whoa, slow down here.
Right.
Yeah.
That was a similar thing going on. But I also figured out my own personal shorthand of shortening like and or those, and so I would have a single letter for those. So you could go back and look at some of my documents, and you'd only see the normal nouns and pronouns fully written out, but the connecting words not, all having a symbol that would represent them.
Yeah.
That's
and then, one way. doing it
and
too,
that,
yeah.
and then when I was rewriting all this, I'm like, what the fuck does that symbol mean?
Exactly. Might as well just write it in bloody computer. Absolutely.
And that journey of writing, of taking everything and writing on the computer, was gigantic for my personal evolution.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, paper or writing on hand and paper, there is a value between hand-eye coordination with a pencil or a pen. I personally love the feeling of a pen, of a Inkmate pen at the tips of my fingers and the flow. And there are often times when I'm typing, I have a pen in my hand and that I'll type with, I'll be like this because it completes something in me.
Right. Interesting. I haven't tried that, but I can get that. Yeah, I must try that. That's actually fun. I think that's also part
So
of,
who holds a pen when they're writing on the computer?
No, but I hold a pen now.
Yeah, you're holding it now because it is doing something. It is triggering parts of your brain to help make manifestation.
Because I'm thinking if there's anything, I always make notes. I love making notes. That's
Me
one
too.
thing. I love making notes. I can't sit anywhere without making notes.
I'm a scribble doodle master. So whenever I'm on the phone or on a phone and I'm taking notes on a message, I'll say, all right, blah, blah said this, and then I'll put it in a circle with all a bunch of lines around it, amplifying that one line. So there's doodles combined with written stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's in the alphabet, isn't it?
Yes, doodling is its own alphabet too.
Yeah, exactly. That's how we create the new alphabet.
Right. So now let's delve into something deeper. Books have been around since the dawn of the printing press and long before that. Okay? In the old days, people wrote books by hand, and then a scribe would rewrite a book and rewrite a book and rewrite a book to make copies of it. Okay? Reading is one thing. When one chooses to create something, let's look at just basic novels. A story about a story. Okay? The mechanics that go into that are super creativity and masterful manifestation. You have the discipline to stay connected to the creativity that's going to create a story arc, no matter how bad or good it is, doesn't matter, that will generate a greater manifestation, which is an exercise of willpower. Willpower to have the flow of creativity uninterrupted by the mechanical process of recording it.
So from a this is narrative writing, right? Where you tell a story.
Yeah.
Now let's look at the mechanics in terms of, as you write that story, you're making up a diverse, different characters all the time. Let's talk a little bit on that. When you write the different, and you describe yourself, I suppose, within all those different characters. How does that work in terms of mechanics, where you're making up 5 characters, and how do you bring those together? They're all part of the story, obviously, but in terms of they're all part of who you actually are as the writer, right?
So there are many different formats of writing. There are some writers who sit down and write without any forethought. There are other writers who think of a story in their head and then write it down, think of more story and then write it down. And then there are the hybrid writers who have an outline on paper and let that outline connect itself through character dialogue. Now, that's for standard novel writing. And there are other people who write everything in play format. Act 1, scene 1, blah, blah says this, blah, blah says that. 24 lines later of dialogue, scene 2 begins. Because they're constructing a story differently because they're writing for themselves versus writing for an audience. When a writer is writing for an audience, They're still writing for themselves, but their effectiveness to use first person, second person, and third person perspective ultimately determines how a book will have perception and perspective of the characters getting across.
Mm-hmm.
In the creation of a character, we are in super creative mode, and that character has to have a concept that drives them. Oftentimes we need a villain in the story to drive the story, unless we're creating a villainless story, so on and so forth. All of those things are in this big bubble of what that creation could be. And the more pages we write, the more times that we edit, the more refined that bubble of denseness the writer is creating is there. Where the writer can go, all right, page 1, I did this, page 19, I did this, I foreshadow on page 37. Then they have a formula that's not an actual written formula. It's a mental process of connecting to the creativity and allowing the old creativity to continuously influence you forward into action.
Yeah, because I've heard, I mean, from some writers, they obviously say they just start writing, and they say just start writing and don't worry about the structure and anything. It will come together, almost.
Yes, as somebody as Alan has done, writing is a process, not an event. Ha ha ha. Because healing, as I say all the time, healing is a process, not an event. Now, I have been writing for a really long time, and I use stories as my personal enjoyment. I write all sorts of stories, sci-fi here, love, like one of the recent story I was doing was the Love Boat in space. Remember the 1970s TV show, The Love Boat? Except it's on a spaceship. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Giant intergalactic cruise liner. And why was I doing that? I wanted the challenge of writing that type of story instead of the action adventure stories that I was writing before. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that journey into creative writing is an exercise, well, as I said, of willpower, but it's also an exercise of attaining joy in the moment.
Yeah, and a letting go. It's almost like when I wrote my second book, it was a matter of it was called a creative writing process, where I just got up and I started writing and I just let it flow, and I had no particular word association or the way the sentence it should sound like or anything like that.
Right.
And I wrote the whole book like that, and then I had to go over it and just make sort of sense to it. It was a different way of writing, but it helped me because I was by far too much in the alpha state. Is this right? Can I write this? Is this the right word? And then obviously English not being my mother tongue either, I sometimes, get hung up. Is this the right word now? Am I using it correctly?
Mm-hmm. Because I write, I only speak English. I only speak some Greek swear words and a little bit of Spanish here and there. I've methodized my linguistical writing, as you can tell with sometimes the way I combine words in such unique formats. Now, that personal wordsmithing journey came because I was a creative writer at a young age, and a thesaurus was my best friend for the longest time. Everywhere I went, I had a thesaurus with me. Why?
Right.
Because I wanted to be able to visualize my words.
Yes. That's what I did when I first came to the UK. First time, being in an English-speaking country. I was exactly like that. Every time I spoke I had my little notebook and I wrote all these words down. And as soon as I got home, I started looking them up. Right. Actually, you know what? I looked up the other day Intrepid, because I hadn't actually, when you always say my Intrepid co-host, I'm thinking, let me, look up this word. And I'm like, fearless and adventurous. Yes! Loving it. I never looked it up before.
Yes. Fearless adventurous co-host, Intrepid.
I love it.
Yeah.
But no, this is why. But I've always had this thing. I love when people express themselves in a slightly more in a different way. I just love it.
Now, a couple months back, I had people write their swearing revocation invocation, and that triggered a lot of people into writing some kick-ass stuff. Gabe and a couple other people sent us, and they read us to they read us to read them out loud, and that allowed them to get past the stigma of spiritual writing, because swearing allows the whole other flow of neural pathways we don't normally use for spiritual writing.
Okay, Andrew, let's just actually give us a definition for spiritual writing. What does that actually mean? Spiritual writing.
Okay, so there's an intention behind the author that they're taking the spiritual ideology and writing it as a manifestation to refine on a practice state. Meaning, right. I may know the teachings, but when I go to write it out and give myself examples, I am tapping into my creativity to expand my own capacity to understand it.
For the purpose of teaching, then? There's
yourself, to teaching yourself.
Teaching purpose behind it, yes.
Yes. Okay. Teaching, yes. Learning purpose behind it. That's the generality of spiritual teachings. There are other spiritual teachings that are purely visionary, that the whole thing is to create a vision in a mind. Now, have you ever read a book where you can hear the words in your head as you're reading them?
I see pictures and everything when I read.
That is because the writer has reached the high level of encodement.
Right.
Okay, that they can do that, the frequency behind the inspiration of the words. And spirituality is trying to get exactly, spiritual writing is trying to get to exactly to that zone, that what I'm putting in it has a greater meaning behind it. And that not just me, but others who may read it will catch on to it.
So this is also the element of, like, when we talk again about your contract revocations, there is this emotional element to it, that people start getting emotional when they read it, because it starts triggering some of their limitations or memories, if you wish.
Not only does it trigger them, it puts them in a situation where they may have total unawareness that it's there. And that's why people stumble over words, or other people go into full emotional meltdowns. Why? Because the frequency behind the actual enunciation process is triggering the parasympathetic to immediately react to it.
So let me ask you then, so when you write that, how do you, you obviously do that naturally, but how, if somebody starts writing spiritually from the perspective of teaching the self and probably others and creating that emotional resolution, how can one trigger that from a more cognitive perspective?
So when I write the revocations and stuff, they come out very fast because I know the natures of what I'm trying to teach. So there's an intentionality of creating word phraseologies that make you go, oh my, cry. There's absolute intention behind them. There are other times in the state of writing where the first page and a half may just be a repetition of a bunch of things I've said before, but that last paragraph is brand new. Whoa! And then I'll take that last paragraph, put it aside in another document, and learn how to use that unique creativity to branch off and keep adding to that unique whoa moment.
Okay, so there is a real fabrication going on. It's not just, it just comes out. You actually really look at the structure of it and how you can improve that structure from a frequency perspective, right?
It's because I write so much that is how it's generated now for me, yes. Okay? Because a lot of times what I do is, like I said, I start a spiritual document. I'll actually go to some other document and copy and paste a paragraph and go off of that. And there are many documents that you've all read that are just copy and paste, random copy and paste of one paragraph from this document, one paragraph from this document, one paragraph from this document, and 9 pages later, you're just reading a copy paste document from all the other ones that I've done, because I know the spiritual teachings already all interconnect with each other.
Yes, yes. So, but we would also be able to say that, you know, if, let's say, for instance, if anyone else would have written the, let's say, I don't know, the carrot and stick revocation, using exactly the same words, it would have a different impact on people because you're obviously infusing the words with your signature frequency, correct?
So that's a tough one to explain because that was written completely in 3 hours, all 19 pages of it. So could someone else exactly create that? No. That was pure divine inspiration with a true comedical kick behind it because I was giggling and laughing the entire time that I wrote it. And the few serious moments like, motherfucker, this is going to stick them hard. Okay, because I knew what I was creating was something that people would be able to use to go, no more.
Yeah.
And that it would have all of these opening, bubbling effects within them.
So that sounds like a creation from a pure bliss state, directly coming from your heart, not even thinking of any philosophies or ideologies, and just really allowing it to come out with your uniqueness that you truly are.
So Petruska Petraeus over here said it's a vibrational construction. Absolutely. I took the vibration of what was welling up in me and made that 19 pages of the carrot and stick revocation as a defining of that vibration.
That's why it's so exhausting to read too. All this bliss flying around, especially in the beginning, isn't it?
But I knew from the very beginning it was meant as an endurance challenge.
Yes.
That's why it came out in 3 hours. Just and the people that were around me writing or listening to me laughing, and some of them were on the Google Doc, you know, in other parts of the country watching me writing, having full spiritual awakenings at the moment, and me going back and I don't like that, erase that. Because I was working with the vibrational source.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
So if anybody's looking for the carrot and stick revocation, that's the Alchemical Union and Communion Collective Consciousness Strike. You go to my webpage, andrewbartzis.com, and click on the Insights tabs, and it will be there, along with a bunch of other ones that are out there. Now, there are other documents, let's say spiritual texts and stuff, that are meant to inform people, that are the teachings that are written from a different perspective, page after page after page. They still come down to we are all one. They still come down to equal co-creation, non-competition, non-hierarchical order. And the journey from page to page to page is to repeat that with different words that help open up the perception of what those mean.
Because every word has a different frequency, isn't it?
As well as a different vibration and harmony behind it too.
Exactly. So this is where this mythology does come in. If you think about it, like mythos comes obviously from Greek, which is the story of man, the story of God, of people, and then you got the logos expressed obviously through the writing and through the speech.
Right.
And through your own unique heart expression, through your own unique frequency, you're creating your own mythology.
And
story,
understanding that the mythology is such a huge part of it. I'm so glad that you put it up. Novel writers are creating a mythology of a world for characters to live in. And oftentimes what stops writers is they don't have a world to work with. Okay? At a young age, I started creating like Lord of the Rings type novels. And I have several of them that are unpublished right now. But I created the world first and then put the characters into it. And once I did this, I could generate story after story after story after story after story after story because I had already created the world.
So when you say some writers don't have a world to describe, to write about,
right.
Say a bit more about that, because I mean, even if you don't go into the imaginary process of creating everything beforehand, you can still write about other stuff. You can write about the universe, the cosmology, mysteries, just facts and figures, and stuff like that.
Right, but those are different genres.
Yeah.
In a totally fantasy genre, there's very little relevance to our modern world other than people talk to each other, they share meals, they wear shoes and hats and stuff like that, but the technology is vastly different. Some use magic, some don't. You have to define how that world works.
So let me ask you a question then here. Is it when you write that type of writing, when you write that, are you ever concerned about what comes out in terms of this is absolutely not possible, or you just make it up? Or do you know, because of your galactic historian background, that this is actually almost
Both.
like
Both.
disclosure?
Both.
Yeah.
Both. There are some things, say the word making it up, we're never making it up. We're creating. Yeah. Okay? Yeah. Making it up has its own negative connotations to it that we don't perceive with judgments behind it. When we're in that complex state of creating a story, we're not making it up. We're creating it so that it has these branches that go off and allow all these little subplot lines to connect with. Oftentimes, I will actually use the records, the Akashic Records, as a formula for me to write something that has a nature of teaching in a chapter.
Right.
Okay? Or the whole thing is a teaching at an end. The whole idea of the story, it may not be exact out of the Akashic Record, but it's a metaphor for what I see, feel, hear, and understand for it.
Yeah. But basically what you are saying is don't ever be put off by the thought of you're just making it up, because that just making it up is actually the creative process of you writing.
Right. And then stacking your creative energy, because part of writing is you go back and read what you wrote and allow it to inspire you in the moment. I call this passing on the torch of our legacy to our future selves.
Mm-hmm.
Like the book you wrote, you didn't just sit down and write it in one foul swoop. You kept having to pick it up, and pick up the torch of inspiration.
Yeah. And it's almost like, even if I reread it not quite frequently, but if I do reread it, it still surprises me what I've written.
Mm-hmm. Because it's so ingenious. Okay. The same thing comes for novel writing. Here's an example. I'll use an example of one of the previous stories that I was talking about. The Love Boat in Space. I came up with 3 characters, and they were going to have not necessarily a love triangle, but they're all going to get introduced to each other. And I wanted the reader, because I was writing it for a reader's perception, to try to guess what I was going to do, to figure it out. But I knew already I was going to make a twist, but I didn't know what the twist was going to be at the end. I just let the characters write themselves, and then figured the twist out by my continuous reading and rereading what I had already wrote.
Okay, so let's go into this. I let the characters write themselves.
Yes.
How does that work?
So it's much like acting, method acting or acting. Who's the character? What drives them? There's so much backstory to characters that never get put into your story itself. Like, let's say I'm creating a character, the female character was a lawyer that retired from being a lawyer and decided that she wanted to go out and be a track and swim coach. That was the character that I created for that. She wanted to teach, people the power of athletic track and swimming and so on and so forth. And she's on this singles cruise, okay, because her faculty had bought her one and told her to go. And then the 2 male interests had something very interesting. One was recently divorced, and the other one hadn't found love in his life. But each chapter was dedicated to the one character, but the reader knows somehow they're going to mix and intertwine themselves. So figuring the character out, writing them in scenes, and allowing a personality to develop, much like you would share a conversation with a person.
Interesting. You said something to me earlier on about writing about the different versions of myself and putting them into a story, right?
Yes. And that's
something along those lines.
Most people who are writers, whatever you're writing about is an aspect in yourself. Until you become a very refined writer where it's not about aspects in yourself, it's about aspects in the reader that you want to connect to.
It's about aspects in the reader you want to connect to. Okay.
Right. Like we all have an inner child aspect. Okay. Let's say our inner child is what it is, but we're writing about a story that has a character that has a very different inner child that will connect to other people who had that same inner child trauma or issue or love or whatever it was.
Okay, I get it. Yeah. So that's where the teaching comes back in, the spiritual teaching of that. Okay, right. Cool.
So when you're allowing characters to write themselves, you don't allow the blockages to get in your way. You just write and go back and edit. That's how it works for me. Not everyone else is like that. There are other people. I worked with a lot of very professional script writers in Hollywood. When they reach full-on writer's block, they call me up and we go through this creative journey and I tap into the records for them. And the next thing I know, they're writing hundreds of pages again. So everyone gets to that writing journey differently. But what I've discovered working with a lot of professional writers is everyone has a writing trauma they have to get over. And a lot of people who are in writer's block, that original trauma is re-imprinting itself on you.
So let's give a couple of examples of those writer's blocks. What can they be?
Let's say you wrote a book report that you put your heart and soul in, it comes back with an F on it. Because it wasn't what the teacher wanted. But you wrote all your heart and soul into it. That is a trauma. Or you find yourself writing something, you give it to someone else to read, and they go, it was okay.
Yeah. Don't ever do that.
Right. But as a writer, you got to let other people read it too. Okay?
I know.
Okay.
But there's an element, again, going back to the heart's knowingness, to the faith, where, and this book, what I wrote, I really couldn't, I didn't go into, I came from the perspective, I don't care if nobody is ever going to read it. I had to write it because it was who I was at the time. It included all the teachings, the learnings that I had learned. I wrote it in a very different style and everything. And literally that hasn't changed. If nobody ever reads the book, I'm good with that. And there's an element of that. And I think maybe everyone needs to write one book like that, because the next one, then you can start structuring in a different, and you can be much more proactive and thinking of what the reader actually requires, not so much what you require as a writer.
Exactly. Writing for a reader means you've become an advanced enough writer to aware what writing for yourself looks like versus writing for the masses of people who will perceive everything differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where you can really then bring in your full awareness of what's actually happening, isn't it? And working from that spiritual perspective, if you wish.
So Alan has another really good one. Sometimes writer's trauma is being your worst critic of your own creation. That's generally because you're a curmudgeon when you're own writing, or your perfectionism is so high that you are blocking the creative flow. Let me tell you, I have plenty of stories that are absolute crap, but there's one golden paragraph in there that I'm proud of. The rest is crap, but that golden paragraph was my champion. It's why I finished the story, even if it's a 9-page story. What I like to do is every couple months, I will go and just randomly think of 2 or 3 concepts or ideas and write 6 to 8 to 10 pages, roughly 4,000 to 5,000 words, and then I'm done. The story will go nowhere else. But because I created a world in a long time ago, I was able to create dozens of these short stories that eventually became a book. Okay? Because I would reuse a character from this last story that I wrote. And then I said, all right, let me take all these smatterings and actually connect it the right way. That's called document surgery. Okay.
Surgery.
When we have a archive of stuff to work with, we're able to take all of these previous creations and surgically connect thoughts, concepts, ideas. Okay.
So this is almost like, you know, some people say they write a book, it took them 20 years. That's that type of process you're elaborating on here, right?
There are a lot of people that it takes 20 years to write a book because they didn't have the time, the effort, the energy to write a book. But when they're done after 20 years, it was a labor of love.
Yeah.
Like John Grisham is one of the greatest writers ever. And you know what he called himself? I'm just a Mississippi scribbler.
Mm.
He would scribble stuff down and they'd become bestsellers. He had connected to that in that flow of being a professional writer, where whatever criticism there was going to be would be is it going to sell 10 million books or 5 million books? He had that already built inside him. The layer of success that he was going to create within his writing.
So is that something we can all learn?
Absolutely. It's your birthright and legacy. That's why if you start writing your chronicles of who you are, what you are, and start getting an archive of stuff, you too will be able to do document surgery on your old stuff. Grab a paragraph from here, a paragraph from there, a paragraph from there.
Yeah. So this is probably for anyone who does look along those lines. You know, I could never do a Grisham or something. You don't have to have that innately in you, but you can actually start the other way, to start writing and then start doing your, what did you call it? Surgery, writing surgery.
Document surgery.
Document surgery. Yeah, I like that.
Yes. Okay. So somebody is asking, can you discuss practice of burning things we have written? So that's a ritual process, and he's asking burning stacks of journals. There are times you write garbage stuff that's from the garbage mind or the depressed mind, and burning it helps take care of it. But it's understanding why. Now, I have lots of journals from 5th, 6th, 7th grade. I'm not ever going to burn those. Those are my treasured memories when I was a little kid, still trying to figure out what was words. Okay, so they're my personal legacy. So if you're going to burn something, or you write something with the intention of burning it, that's a ritual and ceremony you have to personally understand, devise, and evolve for why you're doing it.
Yeah. I don't really keep, to be honest, you know, I haven't really kept all my journals, especially in the very beginning, childhood journals, you know, with all the drama, trauma. I haven't kept those.
Oh, I got rid of the trauma ones, but the ones where they're my pure stories and my pure chronicling of what I was going on, I keep those.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Again, somebody's saying she burnt a big stack of journals from school. Okay. And great. That's what you needed to do to let go of that. That's okay. That's the ritual and ceremony of letting go.
You could also look at it from that perspective. I probably would do is, as soon as you write it down, you're already letting it go.
In some states, but there are other people that write it down and repeat it over and over and over and over again. Okay. There was a character I created that had a very dark side to him. And I actually had to erase and delete that out of a lot of stuff because it triggered things inside me that allowed backdoor entrances from energies I didn't want. Because I was writing a particular story out of the personal challenge of writing a horror type story. And, you know, when you allow your thoughts to create stuff, because I was really into H.P. Lovecraft at that particular time, and I was trying to emulate what H.P. Lovecraft had done. And that particular character, I'm like, you got to go. You're done. And when I was done with it and erased it out of the documents, I just copy paste erased it, and I became fine again. But I also understood that as a writer, we can tap into things that are external of us.
And I think that's a huge point you're making here. So just be aware of that too. As much as you can tap into, spiritual teachings that are beneficial to you, you can also start tapping into the demonic side of it, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Or Robin is saying, Robin is saying that she was writing about erotica. That's another way you can tap into some of the internal stuff inside you that constantly activates you over and over again, which will then lead you down to an external invasion.
Yeah. And would you also say that, let's say you write a couple of, it doesn't have to be a book, but just, a couple of pages of something, and then you look at them, and if there's a repetitive sort of sense in it, then there's obviously something that you can work on yourself. That's a bit of an indication.
Yeah, and you can write the correction to it.
Yeah, you can
create the character that resolves the problem.
As a healing.
As a healing. There are many sub parts of the stories that I wrote which were individual healings for me. Like I've told everyone, I grew up in the restaurant business. I started work when I was 6 years old. And there are many aspects of the story where I have a character similar to that who then got to the journey. Like I will never own or run a restaurant ever in my life, but I have characters that do that as a part of my resolution of that energy.
Yeah. Well, it's a little bit what I said, when I was 15, that story became true. I actually started living that story. Mm-hmm. So I need to write a sequel on this one because, I don't like the ending of it. Yeah. Good point.
So when we become our story, you can easily lose yourself to the story, but sometimes that makes the best writer. Because the story is pure inspirational and creationalism, and it's how we internally process our story that determines if it's going to come out the way we want people to read it.
And everything really is a story, to be honest. Everything is a story.
Everybody is a story. Every person, place, and thing is a story.
It's almost like you're between books consistently. Once you're done with your childhood, that's book number one, and then you go into all that type of stuff. Everything's you might as well just write a really good one, right?
Exactly. That's how I learned truly the authentic art of flipping the frequency. Was writing down the arguments for the limitation and then writing down the arguments for success. Doing it with such intensity behind me that I was confronting the aspect of me that was limiting me to going any further and writing the actual arguments for success versus argument for limitation.
I absolutely love that, because what you're actually saying is instead of trying to fix something, you're going immediately into out creation. You create a new character, which is more conducive to what you want to be and become, and out create the old one instead of losing yourself in this fixing process, isn't it?
Exactly. Now, a lot of singers and songwriters, singing and songwriting is vastly different than writing books and novels. And a lot of singers and songwriters can get caught into the trap of singing an emotion and using past traumas to make lyrics that don't apply to anyone else in the world. And they make horrible songs for everyone else because they're sad and depressing.
Yeah.
But there are the few that can make the broken-hearted love song come true and find the joy at the end.
Yeah. I do remember listening to the songs Emma used to listen to when she was in her teens and stuff, and it was absolutely depressive. I thought, why are you listening to this shit, But I suppose there's a time for that too, where, I don't know.
Well, modern music is written in such a way, in the way that it's produced, to trigger teens into moody moments. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, because a lot of lyricists don't have the freedom to stay the creative journey that they want. And the producers will produce something that's to a genre of buyers.
So what is the mechanic behind when you add rhythm and music to the written word?
Totally different process and journey.
Because what does that do physically to the body?
You're encoding something totally different in the harmony.
And you're encoding it directly into the physical body, isn't it?
Yes.
Through the sound, through the music, through the frequency there.
Because most people don't read books out loud. Okay.
That's right. That's right. And also the song, we're so used to having it run in the background. So subconsciously, we are picking up so much of that sadness, if it is a sad song, that type of stuff, and just encoding it and imprinting it onto ourselves, isn't it? So that's actually quite a responsible way of looking at it, isn't it? You can't just really produce all these shitty songs because you're having a responsibility towards others.
Well, unfortunately, a lot of lyricists get stuck in the I'm going to create, but they forget that they have to edit to make a song really perfect.
I get it.
To be produced. And oftentimes a lyricist writes a song to be sung with just a guitar or just a drum and a guitar. It doesn't have all the other accoutrements that finish a song. And that's basic folk music. Now, before radio and television, you had a guitar and somebody sang, and that was your entertainment for the night. Or somebody did a stand-up skit, or you were talking back and forth, and there was no need for a television because the community shared their entertainment.
Yeah. And now you have a complete overload, isn't it, of stimuli?
Right. And dancing was a huge part of our culture before radio and television. That's why the big band and swing area was so gigantic. Okay? If you didn't grow up in that, you would really have no concept. Everybody sang and danced everywhere they went. That's why musicals took over the early television and radio.
Yeah. And I mean, yes, you can turn the music off just as much as you can say, put a book down if you don't like it. But there is a different element to it, isn't it? Of that subconscious indoctrination, isn't it, through the song?
Exactly. So old musicals have their own corny factor them and great truths. There are plenty of old musicals from the 30s and the 40s that talked about racism and the inequalities that people experienced. Okay, revolutionary and rebellious for its time, and the fact that it made it to international movies was amazing. You go back to look at The Sound of Rain, some of the old musicals. They're quite rebellious in what they're teaching.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Martina, we've delved deep into the nature of writing. Why don't we take a couple calls now on the nature of writing? So if you're a writer, any type of writing, we're going to take calls now. This is not for private session. That will be remaining for the Thursday show. So if you want to talk to me and Martina, why don't you go ahead and click on the participants button and click raise your hand. And then in just a second here, we are going to talk to who wants to have conversations about the nature of what we talked about today. All right, Robert, let's spin up the wheel of callers and see who is first.
All righty. Great conversation so far. William Maston, you are unmuted.
William, are you there? William.
I'm here.
Yes. Hey, William, how you doing today?
Doing great. Yeah, I'm kind of new to the writing aspect of creating your life, so to speak, or like you said, passing on the legacy to our future selves. Could you talk a little bit more about that? Passing on.
So
yeah.
Let's say you've got a bunch of your personal writings about your past of who you are, what you are, chronicles and journeys. When you go back and look at them, there will be parts that inspire you. That is you in the moment accepting the inspiration of the past to actually write it down. That is the pure mechanics of passing on the torch, you accepting the inspiration. And there are other times we write for a future self who we know is going to go through hard knocks and troubles, trials and tribulations. But when we know that that future self goes back and read it, they will pick up the torch and write for the next future self.
Okay. And what if you're trying to erase the past to create a better future?
You don't erase the past. You come to terms with it.
Okay. That's a good way to look at it. Sure. Okay. And when you say that when you write and you write stories and then put the characters within the world that you developed first, it's almost kind of like how the creator works.
Yes, you are the creator. We are creator God source beings.
Yeah. So that kind of created a different view when you want to write, because that's kind of my interest is first, create my world and my future, and so to speak, so that I can share it with others. My big deal is just confidence and knowing that I'm worthy, I'm enough to share it. Because a lot of people that feel that way, not unworthy or not deserving or not enough, feel like, well, why should I share? No one's going to listen anyway, or no one hears me, or that sort of thing. Because when you go about your daily lives, your life, that because I can be outspoken, but when I am, people kind of look at me like, you need to shut the F up, or what are you talking about? That sort of thing. So I don't really say a whole lot at a lot of times.
Well, that's a trauma in itself.
Yeah.
So all too often, people's environmental circumstances rule them. And when one wants to be a creative writer, you're creating your own environmental circumstance to be successful at it. And there's always a peanut gallery in your own writing. So your stuff has got the quality of your authentic self within it. So no matter what the external world says, when one chooses to truly enter that authentic writing space, we are allowed authentic freedom to say what we want to say.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay. Martina, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, to just really to summarize that, whatever you write it for yourself initially. Just write it for yourself. Make up the characters that represent yourself in the future if you wish. Create all of that, and just don't even think of anyone reading it to start off with. Just write it for yourself. And then as you've done that, and then you reread it and change it, all of a sudden it creates its own consciousness, and it will give you the little push and say, okay, now William, you're ready. Just push me out there. Others want to learn something too.
I had a quick question for Martina. She mentioned that she does morning journals from her dreams. And I guess what occurred to me is if you do a morning journal in your dreams, you probably find some unique characters to put into your stories. Would that be true?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And every dream is different. Yeah.
That wild and crazy last night. It was pretty funny, but I'm not going to go in on it. But it was just funny, and I was thinking, okay, morning journals on your dreams. That will be a good one. That will be something.
Go for it. Start with that. Yeah. That's your own inspiration that comes from your dream time. Absolutely.
That could easily become a play written in a play style. Okay. Act 1, Scene 1, Act 2, Scene 2.
Yeah.
Okay?
And then create another scene.
All dialogue driven.
And then find that character, that pretends that he is not confident, and start outwriting him, and then see what happens.
Exactly.
Great. I appreciate you guys. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for calling in. All right, Robert, let's spin up the wheel of callers and see who is next.
All righty. Nadia, you have a single to unmute.
Nadia.
Hello.
Hey, how you doing today?
Oh, pretty good.
What did you think about today's show so far?
I love it. I really love hearing all the different angles on this one act of writing. So much to it.
Are you a writer?
I am. It was how in many ways, how I survived my childhood. You know, when I was cornered into utter powerless by my parents, you know, I get, you know, like children are like little prisoners to their parents, you know, jurisdiction, right? It was how I felt, how I was able to become in touch with my free will. It was how I could express my voice, and regardless of whatever audience was in my journal, you know, I was able to at least get it out of my system.
Which gave you greater growth as an internal human being.
Yeah, I actually was able to develop, stay in touch with my own identity through it in a lot of ways, instead of just becoming enmeshed with whatever my parents wanted me to be.
So are there any questions you wanted to ask us today about the topic?
Gosh, you know, it's just like, it's more of a resonance than a question. Let me think for just a second. Shoot, I don't know if I have a question about it. It's just really to, you know, share the fact that
So let me ask you a
writing was
question.
survival.
Can I ask you a question?
Of
With
course,
all that
please.
experience that you've had in childhood and writing it down and creating your own healing journey with it, how have you continued that now in your adult world, and how can you share that as a contribution with others?
Oh my God, every time I get tangled up in some sort of drama or some sort of like scenario that I'm just not pleased with, I write it down in my journal, and so that I'm looking at it instead of identifying with it. And when I'm able to look at it, it creates just enough space between my thoughts and their grip that they have on me, to where I can start to like wiggle around with perspective and start to experiment like into a solution for that.
Is that something others could benefit from if you would make it available to others? Maybe even make some money with it?
Oh my God,
Just
that would be
a thought,
incredible.
because it sounds like you're very good at it. So maybe it's time to take your passion and make some money with it.
I would love to do that. Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe that's something I should journal about, is how to do that.
Good luck with it, Nadia.
Why, thank you. That's a great question.
All right, darling. Thanks a lot for calling. We're going to move on to the next caller.
Thank you so much.
All right, Robert, let's spin up the wheel of callers and see who we got next.
Okay, Camila, you are up next.
Camila, are you there?
Yes, hello, I'm here.
Hi, where are you calling from today?
I'm calling from London, UK.
London, UK. What did you think of today's show so far?
Well, amazing, because I recently I had a massive resistance to writing, even writing emails, or even talking to people on the phone, or even talking on Zoom. And recently I was going through lots of transformation over the time, over the lockdown. And what happened was, at the end of it, I started thinking that I really want to write. And I was so excited about that fact. So the Today Show reminded me about the situation when I was young. And I remember I used to get up early in the morning on Saturdays, and I would write like pages. I can't remember what that was, but I would write, and amazing some stories. But then I think, I can't remember what happened, but I think I was giving it to my mom, and she didn't have time to read them. So I kind of felt I stopped doing it, and I had some resistance towards writing. So I haven't been doing it for many years. But I feel the excitement now when I actually, when I started thinking about over the 4 months, I had so much more time to focus on myself. I became much more in touch with myself, and I started having this thoughts in the morning, getting up and having ideas coming to my head, and writing was one of them. Like, I really do want to start writing. So yeah, the topic was just spot on today. I think that's going to give me extra courage to actually start, even writing it for myself now.
What kind of stuff are you writing about, or do you want to write about?
So I'm into so I'm into health and fitness, and helping people get healthier, and I'm combining ideas. I would like to combine ideas and make people aware that our beliefs create our reality. So because what happened for me, I was quite ill since I was young, and once I realized that I was creating that illness because of my experiences, so and everything changed in my life. I was actually creating the symptoms, and I was creating the illness. And so this is something definitely I want to start writing about. But there is a fear that there is some fear.
You're going to tap into an unhealed part of yourself.
Yes.
And that is the reason why you should write. And let me just give you a little suggestion here. You know your story better than anyone else.
Yes.
And what I would advise you to do is to create another name. Just pick somebody else's name and write the story. And anytime it's going to be your name, replace your name with the other character and allow that character to develop so that you can have a way of that character will be the medium in which some of the more traumatic stuff about yourself can come through that character. And then when you're done writing and getting it out, you revise it into something that's an athletic, more of an informational book, unless it's a good ass story that will help people change.
Yeah, I think it's because I was this good girl for many years, and then my experiences turned me, into the bad path, I would call, or maybe something I wouldn't normally talk to anyone about it. I've done things which I never thought I'm gonna do, and this is something I definitely want to, I want to talk about it because it's there, and it's just I've got so much energy in me. So I definitely want to get that out. But like I said, that was a great idea. Put it, under somebody else's name and start getting out there and see what I'm gonna get, right?
But actually make the character that is you, but give yourself another name.
Yes.
It allows you this form of separation yet connection for you to say deeper truths.
Yeah.
In the writing journey.
Yes.
Now, I use that technique when I want to discover or connect to inner aspects of myself that are avoiding the light of day. Okay? Or let's say if I'm purely in the character writing scenario and there's something that I've resolved in myself, but I want to put into that character, I can connect to those negative frequencies, but not be affected by them because I've already been healed from it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I'll definitely do that.
And that's how we write stories that connect to tens of thousands or millions. Because a lot of people share traumas or share joys. And when you can have those regular pattern recognitions of shared experiences, it's what connects to people.
Yeah, because they are experiences. So I learned so much from them, right? We always learn from every single experience. So I look at it as a path, learning path, rather than something.
Right. And then how do you write about what you learned and the essence of the experience? because
Yeah.
that's the ultimate goal of a teacher, is to pass on the essence of the experience.
Yeah. That sounds good. Yeah.
Martina, do you want to add anything there?
No, I love your suggestion on the dissociation. You know, that is just powerful, and then that will allow you to find that benevolent teacher within yourself, for you to go out there and come out of the closet. You know, basically, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds great. I really do like that. Yeah.
Cool.
100%. Thank you.
Did you have anything else you wanted to say?
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
Just one question, because I was listening to you. Someone told me about you a week ago, literally a week ago, Wednesday. And I started listening to your videos, and lots of them resonated with me a lot. And there's one thing, you talk about a lot about the dreams. And
Mm-hmm.
and normally I've got lots of really scary dreams. And so if you could give me a suggestion what to do. I know you've been talking something about clearing the bed. I don't know what that means, clearing the corners of the bed.
So that's a prayer process. So what you
Okay.
can do is you can go to the front of my webpage and go to the Insights tab. And what you'll see is 7 documents that are called contract revocations, invocations. And they're the beginning journey of learning how to close backdoors and loopholes that allow things into your frequency. And what it is, it's clearing the energy of the space that you sleep in. And what you can do is pick any of them. Some take 5 minutes to read, some take longer to read, but you generally want to put 20 minutes into the 4 corners of your bed, and then the 4 corners of the room that you're sleeping in. So that puts 40 minutes once a week into saying that I am cleaning the space around my bed and not allowing negative frequencies to get into me when I'm asleep. The other thing is, if you have any mirrors in your bedroom, cover them up while you're asleep. Or take them out. Mirrors are immediate negative portals into the dreaming space. And I tell that to absolutely everyone. If you got a mirror in your room, cover it up or get it out. Okay.
I've got 3 massive ones.
Cover them up and you're going to notice a whole different.
Wow.
Yeah. Windows are also reflective surfaces. Yes. You should cover the windows up too. Put the drapes over them. And the regular process. And if you're really in a situation where the dreams are rough, do it 2 or 3 times a week. The more effort you put into it, the more deeper sleeps you will have.
Because that affects, my day later on if I've got traumatic dreams.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, I'll start with that. Thank you so much.
They're welcome. Thanks a lot for calling in.
Thank you.
All right, Robert,
Bye.
let's take one more caller.
Okay, let's see. Jay Rose, you're getting a signal to unmute.
Jay, are you there? Hello.
Hello, Andrew.
Hey, how you doing today?
Good. How you guys doing?
Great. Where are you calling from today?
I'm calling from Michigan.
Michigan. Welcome. What did you think of today's show so far?
It was a good show to hear. It actually interested me a lot because I've been working on something similar. I've been making my own music video this morning and yesterday. So there's some writing skills that went into that.
Mm-hmm. So what did you want to talk about today?
Well, since we're on the subject of writing, you were talking about songwriters and artists and how that's different from writing a book.
Absolutely different. Yes.
What about when an artist, when they're making a music video and they write a speech and incorporate like a revocation into it?
So once you add video to the auditory process, you've added a whole other layer for the person that's listening who's now observing. And when you add the observer into the listener, there's a multidimensional aspect of easier teaching. There are certain people in the population who are visual learners versus auditory learners, and other people who are hands-on learners. So when you add the video aspect in, you're adding a whole other layer of imparting the embedded encoded energies and frequencies of what you're trying to do.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I'm doing with this music video. I got a lot of different images incorporated to engage the watcher.
To trigger the watcher.
Yeah, exactly, to trigger them.
Because it's their own pattern recognition that takes the images and applies it to what they know or don't know.
Right. Yeah, so what I'm doing was I was thinking about incorporating union and communion revocation in my own voice and putting it as a background layer in the music video, just quiet enough to where the listener can't hear it, but enough to trigger them to do something to them.
Well, there's quite a few people who have incorporated into techno and trance music already. All the different contract revocations people have done that with them so far. I was actually at a club about 2 years ago, and I'm like, is that my contract revocation in a song? And it was. And it was, okay? It was
so
exactly
cool.
like you said. It was subtly in the background between transitions and choruses.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. And that's a great way to get people, because there are people who deeply listen to music, and techno and trance is one of those ways of imparting a lot of information into people, because the rhythm allows greater understanding in the moment.
Right. Does the tempo of the revocation matter? Like the speed?
It can, but it's really about the listener accepting the tempo. That's why you've got to create the mood so the tempo matches, so that the person applies the mood and the energy of the tempo to themselves. Because so much music is really about the vibration behind it.
Okay.
Martina, you want to add anything?
Not necessarily. I'd just like to hear the song once you've done it.
Yes, me too.
Oh yeah, I would love to share with as many people as I can. So
Bring it on.
Yes.
It's Aloha Ke Kua is the name of the song.
Fantastic.
God is love.
God is love. Outstanding. All right, brother. Thanks a lot for calling in.
Yeah, thank you guys. You guys have a good one.
This is it.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, Martina, we're going to call it to the end of the show. You want to give a way for people to get a hold of you?
Synchholistic.co.uk is my private one for any sessions. And then we've got earthnouveau.com, which is our joint mentorship group site where we do Wednesday, 5 o'clock BST, where we have our own little shows going.
All right. And if you want to get more information about me, you can go to my website, andrewbartzis.com. I'm also on Facebook and YouTube. All right, Robert, take us away.
Bye.
Each different bubble of reality is true. A galactic historian is a person that looks at all the lines of dramatic karma. Nudge, nudge, it's the Holy Grail. Improvise. Mysterious. It's counter psychic intelligence.
Why is DNA farming of this star cluster so important?
Because we do manifest our reality. We do create our reality.